Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. And I hope everyone is surviving this storm Bert or whatever his name is now. I'm tucked away in my house. Our weather's absolutely fine. We had dumped snow for a few days, but it's all starting to melt. So I'm tucked up, my fire on. I've got my positive vibes. So if you see smoke behind me, that's all it is. So today I would like to welcome on Claire, who's one of my good friends. And as the video is entitled, it is about the connection between narcissists and demonic possession, essentially, the demons. So Claire has very bravely come on because she is going to share her story of her life, like her childhood growing up with narcissistic parents. And, we've been speaking about this for weeks, going, well, we could really actually help a lot of people, couldn't we, Claire?
Absolutely, yeah,
A
definitely.
lot of people by just you sharing your story. So she honestly, I just thank her so much for being so brave to come on because I'm sure every single one of us has had some sort of connection or experience with a narcissist, whether it's a parent, a partner, a sibling, a friend, even a boss. And Claire has done, I mean, masses of research on narcissism and how it affected her. And just really, it's to share her journey of how she's dealt with it, how she understands it, and where she is today with it all. So I'm going to just let Claire take the floor away and just let's just start off with like just your childhood, what your experience was like as a child growing up in a narcissistic family and how that affected you into adult life. So
Sure, sure. Well, I was in a family with my mother, stepfather, and three sisters. And it was volatile, it was up and down. When I was a lot younger, there was violence. It was a case of waking up every day and sort of assessing what was going on in the family, what sort of mood the parent was in, and sort of acting accordingly. So I obviously at that point as a child, I knew something wasn't right, but it wasn't until many years later that I was able to look at the family dynamics and realize that was a narcissistic family dynamic. The roles changed on daily basis. Some days you could be the golden child, some days you were the scapegoat, just really dependent on what sort of mood the parent was in. It wasn't until I'd say a decade ago that I really made the connection. I knew that I knew that my upbringing hadn't been right, but I wasn't entirely sure what had been going on. And it was after the breakup from my son's father that I started to put the pieces together and started to realize that those dynamics were narcissist dynamics, and that I'd been in that situation as a child. And then because I'd been in that situation as a child, I couldn't really understand why I kept attracting men who were extremely nice at the start of the relationship. But then after a certain amount of time that would change, and things would become very negative. Cheating, lying, gaslighting, emotional abuse. So it really was the breakup of the relationship with my son's father, and me going into therapy. Obviously, when I realized, it was a difficult experience because I realized at the same time that I was sick, that my childhood had made me sick, and that was a big pill to swallow. And at that point, I contacted a therapist and I started doing some talk therapy. That's difficult in itself because a lot of therapists out there aren't really trained um, in that dynamic. I was lucky that I found a therapist that really helped me sort of work through, what had been happening to me in childhood, and because of the template that I had as a child, I was still going out into the world and attracting these men who were essentially hurting me. Narcissists do not have any empathy. They do not care about what they do to other people. And you are just collateral damage in them, living the way that they live. But also, they are very damaged humans. They've had terrible childhoods too. So, for the last decade, I have looked at this from a psychological point of view. But within the last few months, that's changed for me. And now I'm very much looking at it from an entity attachment, spiritual point of view. And obviously, working with yourself recently and having the session with yourself, that's really helped me to start understanding that this is a spiritual problem rather than a psychological problem. Obviously, those two areas do cross over. But for me now, I'm now 100% convinced that narcissists are do have spiritual attachments. Are I don't necessarily like to say demon possessed because I find that people can find that quite scary. But energy attachments, entity attachments, I'm now 100% convinced that that's what's happening with people who are labeled as narcissists. So
Yeah,
that's sort of,
yeah, 100%. And then um, I think we should talk about how you ended up coming back into my life because Claire and I have been friends for a long time, and then we sort of dipped in and out of each other's lives over the years, didn't we?
we
And
did.
then, yeah, and then 2020 came, the lockdowns came, and quite quickly we realized something was not quite right. And we really bonded over that time. We literally traumatized ourselves because we went down the dirtiest and darkest of rabbit holes. And looking back in that, we were not okay, like really not okay. We can laugh about it now, but at the time it was absolutely horrific. And I actually go, gosh, look how much we have learned and how much we've grown, and look where we are now. And then basically, so about 2 years into so it must have been about 2022, I'd gone off down very, uh, spiritual route, even though you were spiritual in a way. And I just remember you kind of like stayed in that. It was almost like the fear part of like, oh no, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to us?
Yeah.
And I remember the time when and I go, maybe I could have done it more graciously, but I did suggest to you that you had, I said, you've got something attached to you. And I remember getting screamed at, and it was like, and I know it was probably your entity that was screaming at me. And then we just like, we didn't fall out, but we just didn't see each other for 2 years. So let's segue that into how you ended up getting in touch with me again and what happened from there.
Yeah, so obviously we didn't really fall out, but we just didn't sort of speak much after you sort of said to me, well, I think you could have demons in you from your childhood. I guess at that stage I wasn't ready to hear that message. Um, I had done a lot of work on myself, done a lot of therapy, but still felt that there was something sort of holding me back from my full potential. I did have quite bad sort of anger outbursts, and someone that was in my life had witnessed one of those outbursts and had said to me, "Oh, maybe you have maybe you have an attachment. So then that sort of got me thinking. And then I ended up having a spiritual reading with what they call, they're like sort of guns that read your aura. And I thought, right, okay, I'm gonna ask them, do I have an attachment? And the answer was yes, that I did have one, but it was low level. And I asked, well, is the reason it's low level because I've been doing all this healing work? And to which the reply was yes. And so at that point, I wanted to get rid of it. I wanted to to deal with it, to get something done about it. And then I thought, well, there's all these practitioners, but out of these practitioners, who can I trust? And, I didn't want anyone that had taken the COVID-19 vaccine. And then obviously I started thinking about you, and also that I think it would be good for you as well to know that you'd recognized it within somebody. And honestly, at that point in time, I felt I was losing my mind. I honestly felt like I was losing my mind. So, long story short, I got in touch with you, and we arranged a session. Um,
Yeah.
and that's sort of how that all sort of came to be. I'd known that I'd known that I was quite a fiery person. I'm a fire sign. I'm Aries, so I'm ruled by Mars, the planet of war.
Mhm.
Like fire signs can be a bit fiery, but yeah, it's almost like something that you really have no control over, and you're left, after the outburst, you're left going, well, where did that come from, and why did I have no control over that? So yeah, so I did have that anger thing. I also my entire life carried an immense amount of grief, to the point sometimes where I would question, where is this coming from? Why do I have such heavy grief? And I've suffered with depression my entire life as well, on and off. So yeah, so then I phoned you up, and we had a chat, and then I came in and had a session with you.
Yeah, and it was quite, and it was incredible actually, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
for anyone listening to this, if you want to go back to, there's I put up a clip of part of Claire's session was the removal of that angry sacral demon, and that was what was attached into the womb, and that was the one that it was when you had, sorry, just explain that sort of auric reading again, and what
Yeah,
you
well,
were told with that.
the aura reading had said that, because I started to ask more questions, because I could see in my mother's relationship with my stepfather, that sort of narcissistic situation going on. And so then I started thought to myself, and obviously my older sister has got the similar sort of anger outbursts and things. So I was analysing my family and looking at that, and I started to ask the questions, well, how long has it been in my family? And I got told that it had attached to me when I was in my mother's womb, that my mother had it, and that it was all throughout the female line of my family, and had been in there for generations. And we worked it back to 17, it was over 200 years. I can't remember if it's 1792 or 32, but I researched that year, and there were a lot of witches being burnt, or they like to call them witches. We know that they're actually healers.
Yeah.
Um, so there was a lot of that sort of thing going on when allegedly this had sort of come into the female line of the family. So obviously, sort of hearing all that information, that's quite a lot to take in. And at the time, I felt quite a lot of grief around that, grief for all the females in my family, and for myself. And you sort of think, well, what would my life have been like,
Yeah.
had this not have been going on.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about the session,
Mm-hmm.
because I do remember correctly, this is one we had third eye demon that came up first.
Yeah.
And I think was that I'm trying to remember that was where it was there we released a lot of grief with that one, and then that was the one that told us about the one in the womb.
Yeah.
Then we had one in the solar plexus,
Yeah.
and then the big one in the throat. I
Yeah.
remember like halfway through the session because we did it face to face, and you know you needed to go to the bathroom. Sorry, I'm just going to take a little drink of water. Um, and you just sat up and just looked at me and went, "Oh my God, this is like a full-blown exorcism," and just gave me a massive hug. And I was like, "It is. We're doing an exorcism."
Yeah.
And then you came back in, and then we took that big one out of the throat. But if you want to just explain to the viewers, like, what was it like having a session? And
Hmm.
then you can do that, and then we'll go on to how your life has changed since
Sure.
having all these, let's just call them energy suckers taken out of you.
Succubus. Yeah. Um, it was, I had no control over my voice. I had no control. I remember my legs shaking. I was in a huge amount of grief. I couldn't stop crying. Um, but then I also remember sort of towards the end of it, just this sort of overwhelming sort of sense of peace, overwhelming feeling of peace. But yeah, there was a lot of grief going on there. And when I sort of sat up and had to go to the toilet, I was thinking to myself that there's no way that people can deny that this isn't real. This is like,
Mhm.
I have no control on what's going on with my legs, the shaking, the sobbing. Um, so the session itself, yeah, it was quite intense.
Yeah,
It was quite intense.
that's one word to use, but also it's, you know, what does it feel, you know, releasing all of that grief out of your body?
Well, to be honest with you, I felt very. It's like you have to get to know yourself again. That
Yeah,
sort of felt, and it's something that you don't just walk out the session and your whole life has changed. I think it takes time. Um,
yeah,
it takes time. I've been very neutral in my emotions, like, and almost to the point where I'm like, who is this person that's so neutral? Because before, um, I could be emotional and people could get reactions out of me, and I could be triggered really easily. Um,
hmm,
and since that session, there has only been one time quite recently where I did get triggered. But what I've noticed about myself now is that I have a pause before I react.
hmm,
And I didn't necessarily have that before. So I can see when I'm becoming triggered, step back and react in a different way.
yeah,
So that's obviously quite a powerful tool. And when you've lived a life around people who are looking to trigger you, looking for a reaction, that it's embedded in you. But now there is that pause and look at the situation and analyze how I'm going to respond, if I'm going to respond at all. So that actually gives you a lot of power.
yeah, yeah.
Soon,
And that's it's really important as well, because I always say to people, like this, you know, you can remove these things. It's not a magic wand, because if you're going to go back into your life and behave the same way that you were before
yeah.
and not take control of your emotions and not just just as you say, take control of all of your emotions, really.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to invite all of those negative, you know, because we're almost like a magnet, you know, we will magnetize in wherever our frequency is at. So, you know, I was just like so delighted when you're just like saying to me, I yeah, I just feel really calm.
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, you were like spent a couple of weeks just going, I don't know who I am anymore because you're not behaving in the same way that you did. And
Yeah,
it just shows you how these, let's just call them the negatively polarized entities can really, meld in with your mind, your body. And I think another important thing to say, because I remember you suffered like really, really bad, like menstrual pain.
I did.
So let's talk about that. How did that change afterwards?
Yeah, well, that started to change actually when I had the spiritual reading, and when I became aware that I had an energy attachment, the pain started to subside then. And I mean, I had pain as a child when I first got my period, and I would have to come home from school, lie in a darkened room, take painkillers, and sleep. And that was a regular thing for me when I first started my cycle as a young woman, and then I didn't have it for a while, and then sort of the last 4 or 5 years when I've sort of been coming into menopause, that debilitating. I mean, to the point where you have to lie down and you have to take painkillers, and you can't get on with your day unless you're doped up on painkillers because you're literally in so much pain. So, since the reading and the session with yourself, I no longer suffer that pain. So that in itself is a really positive thing as well. That's not happening anymore. So I'm really glad that that's gone, because that was a regular, and it was every period. When I was a
Yeah.
woman, and then coming into menopause, there was no let up. There wouldn't be one without it. It was just the norm that I would be in a lot of pain with that.
Yeah, and it's like it's so draining on your energy. And
Uh,
then I also remember was it what happened 2 nights after the session?
oh yeah, so the first night I was just very, very peaceful, very, very tired, got an amazing sleep. And then the second night, I for some reason I can't remember if I'd been asleep and then woken up and got up. But I was in the kitchen and I was sat at the table, and behind me there's a cupboard, and it has like baking stuff in and casserole dishes and things like that in it. And I was just sat at the table, and then I heard this massive bang, and but I also felt the force of this massive bang, and I sort of looked behind me and thought, like, where does that come from? That couldn't possibly be anything falling in that cupboard that would have such a loud noise and create, like, literally I could feel wind blowing like past me. So it was that was quite strange, but I just remember thinking to myself, right, don't go into fear, don't go into fear, it's fine, it's okay, just don't go into fear. Got some sage out, did some sage, said a few prayers, and then thought, well, I hope that, like, I'm not going to experience that again. So that was that. Yeah, that was
Hmm.
quite bizarre. But apparently, your senses are heightened after hypnosis. But to me, that bang was huge.
Yeah.
And then the man that I'd had the spiritual reading with said that he wouldn't be surprised if that was them trying to sort of enter
Yeah.
back, you know,
Hmm.
try and lower my vibration to sort of get back in.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so honestly, thank you for sharing your experience about what happened and how your life's changed. And I know now you because you are experiencing much more financial abundance.
Yeah,
Things just seem to be flowing much better in your life.
yeah, they absolutely do. Obviously, I've mentioned sort of the pause that I have. I mean, the other things, I have an increased sense of self-worth. I'm more focused. I have much stronger boundaries, and I'm better at maintaining those boundaries, because obviously when you grow up in a toxic sort of family environment, boundaries aren't really a thing. So I've had to work on boundaries for the last decade. And also, it's one thing to work on the boundaries, but you also need to maintain the boundaries. So I feel that I'm much better at that. I'm moving on from the version of me that allowed people to take advantage of me. I very much, it's similar to what I went through when I started talk therapy. You start to analyze all the people you have in your life, and how they're treating you, and analyze the relationship. And if the relationship's unbalanced, then that starts to become glaringly obvious. um and I would say that, if you do have connections with people that also have entities, you may well find that those relationships change, fade away. From what I've learned from the spiritual reading that I had and the life that I've lived, I wouldn't be surprised to know that whatever the entity was, or entities inside of me, they attract each other.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so you're attracted to the entities in other people as they are attracted to the sort of, the entity in you. Um, and I've also, it definitely takes time. It definitely takes time for all of these things. You need to sit with yourself, and you need to analyze yourself. And it's like you said, it's not you just get a session and your whole life changes. The work still continues after the session. And you might slip up, you might fall back a bit, but it's very much still doing the work after the session. And yes, from a materialistic point of view, my life is going in directions that I would never have imagined. And I'm now an office manager for a joinery company. I've got my own cleaning business, which is growing with doing builders cleans through the joinery company that I'm working for. And I've never made this much money in my entire life. So that's obviously really, really nice. And I've also passed my driving test, and I'd had sort of fears and nerves around that. So that's, like life is going in a really good direction.
Mhm.
And it feels like sort of like a seal was broken, because I was striving to do better, but maybe felt like I was sometimes being pulled back. So it's all been a very positive experience.
Yeah, it's just having that belief in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, the other thing that I was going to actually ask you about is, would you be able to explain to the viewers about narcissists and this transference of energy between people like ourselves? Because, this is what they're almost like sucking the living daylights out of us to make us feel so small, so awful about ourselves, because they're amazing at turning it around, because it's never ever their fault. And I know that
Yeah.
you've been doing some pretty good research, finding various people that are very good at explaining this. So if you can just share a bit of that with us too.
Absolutely. So for a long time, I looked at narcissistic personality disorder from the psychological point of view. But obviously, with everything that's happened this year and what I've been through and what I've discovered about myself and my family, I'm now 100% convinced that it is entity attachment. And the the narcissist is not self-aware. They're an empty vessel. um, they've had a terrible time in childhood, and they've got into low vibration, and this is when the entities have started to attach themselves. And because they are empty vessels, they need validation from out. Externally, they need that validation. And when we are put into an emotional state, um, it breaks the auric field. And once the auric field is broken, the narcissist can then penetrate you. And what goes on is a switch in energy. So they're taking your good energy and cloaking themselves with that good energy. And to the outside world, they look like a really great person. And then you end up taking on their energy. So they're taking it out from your auric field because they want to trigger you, they want to get an emotional response from you. So this is why you can feel really drained when dealing with people that are narcissistic. And there's a guy that I'd like to give a shout out to, a YouTube channel that's really helped me recently. And he has had relationships with narcissists, and a few of them, married to some of them. And his channel is Soldier Up Productions. And he's really helped me sort of understand what's going on with this energy transference between, narcissists and empaths. And narcissists don't go for people. They go for people who have light, who are successful, because they want to swap that energy. They can't create on their own, and they need that energy. And that's why they need so many people around them validating them, because if one source of supply drops off, then they need the other sources of supply to go to gain their fuel, because they are empty vessels. So for me, it's definitely a spiritual problem. And there are so many references to what is happening with this sort of energy attachments. And one of them, which I like from the Bible, is Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So, for me now, it's not so much down the psychological road as it is, I think, this is a spiritual problem that we've got.
Yeah, we're definitely in a huge spiritual battle.
Absolutely.
Um, and I just think it's really important that people start opening up their minds to this. Essentially, it's a hijack of the human race.
Yeah.
Because I've always said that, babies, well, we actually now know babies are not always born pure because of this attachment that can come in through the lineage. And I find that all the time
Yeah.
in sessions, like
Mm.
these, let's just call them dark energies have attached into that baby because it's
Yeah.
beautiful, fresh light, so that child never ever gets to experience its life as that pure spark of source light. It's always had something sucking sucking it out. So it's never, fully known joy. And then you can, you just look at children, how emotional they can be, and parents don't understand, well, where's that come from?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but we're going to wrap this up soon. Is there any advice that you can give to anyone who is in a narcissistic, an abusive relationship, or just dealing with this, and also, what's the best thing that they could do?
Well, the best thing you can do is to not give them an emotional response. There's a method. It's called the grey rock method, where you literally are a rock with no emotion whatsoever. Obviously, it's difficult because you can have children with narcissists. You can have parents that are narcissists. As you said at the start, there's all these different relationships. The best thing is to not give an emotional response, and to get yourself out of that relationship and start, go to therapy, just get away. But it's very difficult because you're completely drained, because your energy has been drained, and what's being replaced with that is negative energy. So they attack your spirit, they take your soul. And it's not like recovering from a normal breakup. So there is a lot of work there to be done, and to realize that if you have come from a family that's narcissistic, then it has made you sick, unfortunately, and you need to get the help and the therapy, to retrain yourself, and to deal with the fact that that's actually made you ill, and you're going to carry on attracting that sort of person until you sort of heal yourself. And to anyone that's watching that's going through anything similar, please reach out in the comments, and I'd happily talk to anybody that has been through similar situations, because it's a very difficult, dark road. I look at my life and I sometimes wonder how I'm still here, and how, it's been constant from childhood through adult relationships. So yeah, just don't give them the emotional reaction, because that's exactly what they're looking for.
Yeah. And also the fact, you talked about, which I also talk about, is when you are in trauma and that auric seal fractures and breaks, that's how entities get in. So, you've got the narcissist with that big, you know, powerful one
Mhm.
in them. And then you'll maybe have that little underling, which makes you into that weak mouse. But then you've also got, all these different parts of you, angry and like the anger coming out, something's attached into your throat, and then you say nasty things, and then you might have one there in the solar plexus, which then gets fed off the vileness of the throat because you're then feeling shameful and guilty, and it's just, it just goes on and on and on and on. But
Yeah,
yeah, as I say, we could sit and speak about it for hours, but if I really hope people, resonate with this. And as I say, please reach out. I'm going to put that guy's YouTube channel. I'll put a link for that in the description below,
yeah.
so people can go and check that out as well, because you said it really, really helped
Yeah,
you.
it's really helped me, and he's been through these relationships himself, and if you've been looking at narcissistic personality disorder through a psychological lens, this guy really helps to make you understand, or help you understand, that this is spiritual warfare, this is entity attachments, and these people lack empathy, and they're coming for empaths. They are predators, they are parasites, they will suck you dry and then discard you. They cannot suck you dry any longer, you're nothing to them. So he's really, really got a lot of knowledge to share, and I would recommend people listen to him.
Okay, fantastic. And also, I just think it's amazing that, we are moving on just from the psychological aspect of it and starting to bring in the spiritual aspect and, putting the jigsaw pieces together, because 10 years ago, I mean, it wasn't, this information maybe was available, but not to the extent it is now. So, Claire, honestly, thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And I'd love to get a bit of conversation going on the comments for anyone who has maybe gone through similar experiences. And honestly, please reach out, and we will, Claire will be there happy to
Really.
help. And if you want to hear any more, like content like this, please also, drop it in the comments, and also, like and share this so we can start spreading the word, because we're in this situation on earth, and it's all about, we all have to start healing, and we're all brothers and sisters, and we all need to help pulling everyone in to walk everyone back to where it is that they need to be. So once again, Claire, thank you. And
Thank you for having me on. And
that's always been a pleasure.
I just wanted to say one more thing to say, and I just feel that if another's pain and suffering can be transmuted into a tool to help others, the light is truly winning.
Beautiful. That is such a nice place to end. So I'm going to say goodbye to everyone, and we will see you next time.
Bye.